Hi, Justin from Spalted Stag Studio. In this video, we're going to walk through a very different style of end table I designed. Wasn't really sure how it was going to turn out, but in the end, I was mostly satisfied with it. First up, I'm starting with some 8-quarter walnut for the legs. This stuff was in pretty rough shape, so I lost quite a bit more than I anticipated, but it wasn't too big of a deal. I just had to change a couple things later on in the plans, and everything worked out fine. Once I started cutting the legs, I realized I really wasn't satisfied with the plain square look, so I decided to put a taper on them. Now, when I first did this off camera, the offcut piece got jammed in between the saw blade and the plate, which scared the crap out of me, so here I'm just breaking it off before I finish the cut so it doesn't get jammed again. I could easily mitigated this by having a zero clearance plate, but I haven't gotten around to making that yet. This next part is how I compensated for the smaller legs. I just ended up having to make this template a little bit longer, and my end measurements were the exact same, so nothing else changed. And I'm going to use a jig on the bandsaw that I downloaded from Cat's Moses and cut up on my laser. It's really important to get as close as you can to your template. The more you have left over, the more you're going to wear out your router bits, and they get very expensive very quickly. I'm using a spiral bit, which is absurdly expensive, but this thing is amazing. I very rarely get tear out, and it's lasted a very, very long time. I just recently purchased this domino. It was a very difficult purchase for me to make. It is really expensive, but honestly, I couldn't be happier with it. It made this build very, very easy, and everything went super smoothly. Now, it has these feet onto it, so you're able to perfectly line up your mortises on each piece. So that all went great, and it made glue up super easy. I like to apply a little glue to the end grain before I do my actual glue up. Give it a couple minutes to dry, and the idea is it's going to block the pores from absorbing the glue when you do your actual glue up. It's worked so far for me. I haven't had any failures, so I continue to do it. When we first started this recording, it was done on my cell phone. We were in the process of waiting for a new camera to show up. I forgot to put it in landscape mode, so that's why the frame kind of looks a little weird. So in a second, you're going to notice a drastic change in quality and frame size, so I apologize for that. I'm going to follow the same process as the last template. This piece is going to be what actually holds the cabinet to the legs. So just doing the bandsaw, router, and then I will later cut the dados into it that will go on the cross sections for the legs. This is the cross section that is going to support the cabinet part. There's a little bit of lip on those, so that'll give it a raised look and hopefully blend in so you can't see it from most angles. This mahogany is a lot thicker than I would normally do. It's a little over an inch thick. So since a lot of the table support is coming in here and it's also going to hold a fish tank, kind of needed to make it a little bit thicker to be able to retain that weight and not buckle. I'm just going to go ahead and cut it down to rough dimensions for what I need. And here you can see me, I'm checking for snipe. I don't normally get snipe, but I always like to double check to make sure. I'd rather find it now than later. Luckily I didn't have no snipe, so just cutting everything down to size. I'm going to go ahead and drop my blade down to 45 degrees for the miter cuts of the cabinet. I really recommend using these digital gauges. They're really accurate and it's not really that expensive. It works great. I'm going to go ahead and get everything cut to final length now with the bevel included. This will be for the two sides and the rear. The front is going to be a push open drawer, so that will not need a bevel. Here I'm going to go ahead and cut the rabbet for the top piece of plywood. I'm making it a little deeper than the plywood so it helps kind of hide that bracket we were making earlier. Next I'm cutting the dados for the lower portion of the cabinet. Normally I wouldn't use 3/4 inch plywood for this, but it is going to support the whole weight of this table, and we're putting a fish tank on it, so it needs to have a lot of strength. Again, dado would have really helped in this spot, but like I said, I really don't like mine, so I just use a flat tooth ripsaw blade. Go ahead and cut the lower portion of the cabinet out and get ready to do our glue up. Glue up did not go as smooth as I would have liked, as does anytime you try to glue mitered edges together. You really should have used the domino. I was a little intimidated by it. I haven't done any mitered projects yet with it, and I just need to practice, and I should have did this prior to doing this glue up. If you've ever tried gluing mitered edges together, you understand the pain that I'm going through right now. Every time I apply a clamp, it something slides. It just took quite a bit of finagling to get it correct, but in the end I got it, so I'm not too unhappy about it, but it definitely was way more complicated than it needed to be. So I'm just confirming that all my measurements line up with the plans. And I'm going to line the base up on the cabinet, make sure everything's flush, and then go ahead and trace these brackets. It's imperative that these are close to perfect as possible, otherwise the cabinet will not sit flush on the base. Just kind of following the outline I just made, the chisel. And once I get that done, I'm going to go ahead and hit it with a router plane. I'm not taking off too much material, just enough to give something for the brackets to sit in, and that's going to assist me a lot when I do the glue up. I'm going to attach the cabinet to the base. Just a little bit of glue, try not to get too much squeeze out. Parts we routed out earlier made it real easy, lined up perfect. And we're going to go ahead and put 3 screws in each bracket. Anytime I glue panels, I always hit it with the hand plane. This ensures that you're going to get a seamless fit. And it's just one of those things that only takes a couple seconds and it gives you much better results. So again, I can't stress how impressed I am with this. Normally when I glue panels, I have to use coals, and sometimes it gets kind of stressful just making sure it gets flat, especially since this is going to be wider than my planer. So anything that was wrong, I would have had to fix with the sander. Here I kind of messed up the glue, put it in the wrong side, so ended up dumping glue all over my clamps. That was fun. As you can see, everything's a pretty tight fit. I ended up using the clamps to pull everything together before I actually clamped it all the way. It went together great. Everything was flush, didn't have to worry about sanding everything flat. Okay, so these squares are a representation of where the spacers are going to go for the actual top. The lower and top ones, I'm actually going to drill oblong. That way I have room for expansion. The center ones will be just one hole straight through. Don't have to worry about expansion on that part. This part was kind of a nightmare. I originally wanted to do it in the drill press, but it just exceeded the maximum depth of the drill press. Kind of got lazy, taped the 2 boards together, and I just was not drilling straight, so it made it a lot more work than it needed to be. Normally, I don't use stain. I really enjoy the natural looks of wood, and I don't like to cover it up. But here for the top, it needed to be really, really dark in order to kind of blend in with the shadows and to make it look like the tabletop's floating. So I didn't really have any other solution other than stain. I really don't know why I stained the bottom. I didn't need to, and it kind of made more work for me, as you'll see later on in the video. So if I did it again, it would definitely just be the top. While I was waiting for the stain to dry, I went ahead and put the chamfer on the tabletop. Now the way I designed this, the bottom portion of the chamfer will line up with the cabinet. So the tabletop's a little bit bigger than the cabinet. And then I just put a little bit of a chamfer on top, just enough to break the corners. The spacers that are going to go on top of the cabinet and attach to the tabletop. This is going to give it the appearance that it's floating. The measurement of these are pretty arbitrary. I just went with 2 inches by 2 inches, and each tabletop is going to have 9 brackets. Like the cabinet top, these gotta have oblong holes to account for wood movement. I'm just going ahead and mark these. I'm gonna go ahead and mark the tabletop. Double check to make sure I had it square. Everything looked good, so I'm gonna go ahead and drill some pilot holes. I'm just gonna use some CA glue to glue these down. It doesn't have to be very strong. It's gonna get screwed together anyways. I'm also using a 420 bolt, and that's just to ensure that it lines up perfectly with the holes underneath. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and screw it to the top now. I'm just using pocket hole screws and a washer, just really making sure that it lines up perfectly. So taking my time, using a flashlight, making sure everything lines up with pilot holes. Okay, next up is the drawers. I'm gonna go ahead and run the dados on the bottom for the lower portion of the drawer. Again, something that would have been much easier if I would use a dado blade, but like I said, I don't really care for mine. Okay, so for the rear part of the drawer, I'm just gonna go ahead and cut this where I left off on the dados, and you'll see why later on in the video. I'm gonna go ahead and use a dovetail jig, and I know I should do it by hand, but I just haven't had time to practice enough to be comfortable with it. And I ended up messing up on the rear because of how it was cut shorter. I had to change some things, but it ended up working out okay. The dovetails blew up, went fine. Didn't have no real issues other than me trying to put it on backwards and the inability to keep my tongue in my mouth as I do anything. So it's really important that this was square, especially with the push to open drawers. It's a little more sensitive, so I just really had to make sure it was perfect. I'm gonna take some measurements for the drawer bottom now. Honestly, quarter inch would have been more than sufficient. I only had half inch on hand, so I just went with overkill and used that. Okay, this is why I made the back of the drawer a little bit shorter, so that way this panel slides right in and blew up a cinch. I somehow lost some footage, so I don't have the installation process of these drawer slides. But I did make a mistake, and you'll see that here in a minute. Other than that, it was easy. I may do a installation video in the future on that. So I didn't account for the screw heads and the clearance for this. It was really, really close, but just to ensure that it operated smoothly, I needed to take a little bit off the drawer. So I'm just hitting with my hand plane and solving that issue. Okay, here's my big mistake on the drawer installation. I didn't accommodate for the push action of the drawer. So this is all meant to be flush. And obviously, in order to push it open, it needs to go in a little bit. So I'm just lining everything up. I'm going to trace it, and I'm just going to do a little bit of an offset to accommodate for that. Okay, got it all traced. So I'm just checking, make sure everything's square, darkening out my lines a little bit. I'm going to take it to the table saw and start this tedious process. I'm only taking off about an eighth of an inch deep, so it's not very much, but it should be enough to accommodate for that push action. Okay, that worked great. So I'm gonna go ahead and attach the face to the drawers. This is why I really didn't need to stain the bottom. I ended up having to scrape some off with the plane anyways. Wanted some bare wood, that way the glue had something to bind to. I need to be really careful that I apply enough glue to bind, but not enough to get some squeeze out. The back it's fine, but on the sides, if that squeeze out got into the drawer slides, it could ruin them, and there will be no way to replace them. And I still can't keep my tongue in my mouth. Just means I'm concentrating, I guess. Anyways, gonna go ahead and apply a couple clamps. I don't need much. It's sitting in there pretty well, and it's a pretty tight fit, so it'll hold itself. So I'm just applying a couple mahogany strips to help cover up the plywood. I was running real low on mahogany, so I kind of had to improvise it in a couple spots. All right, every woodworker's favorite part, sanding. And this was a meticulous process. There were so many nooks and crannies, and just had to be really sure that I wasn't putting pressure in the wrong places. Unfortunately, I don't have any video of the lacquering process. My finishing room is fairly small, doesn't have the best circulation, and I was really nervous about the lacquer damaging my camera. But hopefully in the future, I'll figure out a way to prevent that, and I'll be able to get some footage of that. But for now, I'm just gonna have to skip it or use another finishing process to show you. All right, and here's the finished product. Let me know what you think in the comments, and like and share the page. Thank you.